Astronauts to the moon.
10, 9, ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
Welcome to reality.
What's going on, everyone? It's Jaronism, back with another video for you today. 90 miles and flat. We know that the water always finds its level. That much we've covered. And we just can't seem to find the curvature of Earth. So let's add some icing on the cake. And by that, I mean let's prove what the actual curvature of our Earth is. Now, we've had people lately screaming,
math is reality.
Then they correctly rephrase that too.
Thing that you do has a mathematical principle to it, or can be described using mathematics.
And that I do agree with. So, if everything that we can do can be proven or shown mathematically, then what is the equation, or what is the curvature of the entire ball Earth? Math itself is not reality. However, we should be able to describe the curvature of our 25,000 mile Earth in mathematical terms. So let's show some examples of how wrong this equation actually is. Mathematicians, scholars, intellectuals have all agreed that the curvature formula is 8 inches per mile squared, but that it only works for a quarter of the globe. Therefore, the original 8 inches per mile is wrong. Now, if we took 25,000 people and spread them 1 mile apart, what would we measure as curvature between us? Because I've heard people out there lately saying,
I will show that few, if any, of the arguments put forward for flat Earth theory are supported by sound reasoning and compelling evidence.
So my question to those people would be, where is this answer? If no one can show curvature, then is that not proof of no curvature? And if the repeated equations do not sufficiently account for all the known curvature of Earth, then I can predict that there is no curvature of the Earth. So if the given equation, 8 inches per mile squared, does not account for the entire curvature of the ball Earth, because it only is good up to a quarter of the ball Earth, then should it be considered a fact? What is a fact exactly?
Fact would be something that can be objectively proven and verified more than once and by more than one person, I suppose. And a theory would be some sort of explanation given or used to try and understand the facts that are known. Would be a general explanation that I might give.
So what is the actual equation that I would then use for the curvature of the entire Earth? Because if I can't measure it, then I can't prove it to be false. And if it's unfalsifiable...
And if it cannot be tested, it cannot be falsified. This is pseudoscience by definition. Flat Earth can therefore be accurately described as a belief system, the simple definition of which is a set of mutually supportive beliefs.
So isn't it true then that the heliocentric model is only a set of unfounded beliefs strung together as a belief system?
The heliocentric model is at very best based on a bunch of unfounded assumptions, at very best, okay? But it doesn't follow from that the Earth is flat. It doesn't follow. It logically doesn't follow. And if that doesn't make sense to you...
Let me explain why it doesn't make sense to me. Because if we can show that several areas across the Earth are flat, and we can't show that they have curvature, then it logically leads to the conclusion that the Earth is not curved and is flat. The problem is, we are being lied to. We're being told something that isn't true, and it is being taught in schools to our kids as fact. It isn't fact. Math is not reality. We can show that the curvature formula is only correct for a quarter of the globe. So if we were to line up 25,000 people, each measuring the curve between them and the next person, and we add it all up, wouldn't it have to be the entire curvature of the ball Earth? Now, up next we're going to be taking a little drive on a 90-mile straight road in Australia that has very little change in elevation. The change is about 170 feet. We'll call it 200 feet just for fun. And you can actually see the 200 feet in change. I'm willing to say at this point that if you're willing to finish this video and not able to admit that the problem and the question of where's the curvature of the Earth should not be at the forefront of inquiry of our world's scientists, then you don't care about truth. You care about hugging your little ball and going to sleep with it in a corner and making sure nobody ever takes it away from you. But if you care about truth, then you'll realize by watching this video that there's a problem. We've got a lot of land and there's no curvature. We should be able to measure each segment and it should add up to the entire curvature. So get ready to go on this 90-mile straight ride, and I'll talk to you throughout it and explain why, if there's no curve here, and even if there were, it still does not equal a ball Earth. It's time for Totally Global. Alrighty, so let's begin. We're on Eyre Highway, or Highway 1 in southern Australia, and we're going to be taking the 90-mile journey from Baladonia to Kaiguna, which is a 90-mile straight. I think my calculation came up to 97. And we can also take a look at the change in elevation according to Google Earth, and you just simply hit the path button and then you can hit show elevation profile, and we'll see here the change in elevation, which I think goes from about 500 to 370 feet. Believe it or not, that's a cliff there on our right heading out to the water. Very cool pictures over there if you check it out. And you'll also notice here down there is the elevation profile, a change of 0.1%. And also it just kind of shows you, I can't read that from here, I think it's 150, 160 feet change. Call it 200, call it 500, doesn't matter. The actual curvature that it should be is of course much more. So this is the change in elevation. If we were to take the curvature formula, which is the 8 inches per mile squared, and you multiplied that out by 90 miles, you get over a mile of curvature. Over a mile. But people should realize there's a problem. Now in this travel, and you can see the way the arrow is traveling up top is the way that the elevation profile is changing. So we're going to be taking this ride from Baladonia, which is on your left, to Kaiguna, which is on your right. So we're going to be going actually downhill, and I'll change that here so you can see what I mean. Yeah, we have to readjust this by going from here to here, so we can actually show what's really happening. And when we do show that, you'll see that we're actually going to be traveling downhill, going from 500 feet to 370. So there you go. Now, as we're driving, you'll see many instances where the road will look like it's going up. The reason for this is, of course, if you put your car anywhere on this path from left to right, you should notice that as you're pointing down, you're going to see the rise in elevation in front of you as a hill. No matter where you're at, unless you're going uphill, you're going to be going down, looking at the road coming up after the current down stretch. So you'll be able to see that here shortly. Let's take a ride. We're starting off in Baladonia. Let's have some fun. Okay, so we're traveling 95 miles is what we'll have as our distance here. And we're starting again in Baladonia, heading to Kaiguna. Okay, so now we'll look at the Earth curvature calculator with an eye height of 15 feet. Obviously, you should be able to tell our eye height probably here is 5 feet, but I'm trying to err on the side of the globe as much as possible to show why this should be the number one question, the number one inquiry on the forefront of everyone's minds to every scientist in the world. And why it's not, I don't know. So at 15 feet high and a target distance of 95 miles, the amount of curvature would be 5,431, still above a mile. And as we're driving, we will be seeing, like there, where it looks like the road is going up in front of us. Again, that's because we're traveling downhill and looking at the road coming up after. Actually, in this drive here, we will be going downhill from 520 feet above sea level to about 370 feet above sea level. So, now we're passing some people. Cool. Now, even after we take this journey and we realize that we just went 90 miles and only changed elevation a couple hundred feet, let's pretend that we did measure 5,400 feet of curvature. So let's say there's over a mile of curvature in this 90-mile stretch. Well, then if we take 25,000 miles and divide it by 90, we get 277. So that means there's only 277 segments of 90 miles on Earth. So if we take that 277 and multiply it by the 5,400 feet, guess what? We get 284 miles. Do you believe that there's only 284 miles of curvature on the 25,000 mile Earth? Of course not. It's preposterous. But you still got people like John LeBon saying,
there's an area in Bolivia which is flat for a long distance, or a long area, a big area, and somehow that proves that we live on a flat Earth. Now, there's a couple of problems there. Firstly, is it a logically valid argument to claim, even if it's true that there's this big Bolivian salt flat, that because there's one big area that's flat, that the whole Earth is flat? Is that a valid argument? I would suggest no, and here's why. If I could find a large area that was actually curved, could I then say, well, that part's curved, so we live on a ball? Or if I could find a large part that was concave, could I then say, well, I found a large part of the Earth that's concave, therefore the whole Earth is concave? Most people would say no, it doesn't follow. I would agree with them. So this argument, even if there was a Bolivian salt flat that was proven to be genuinely flat over a large distance, does that prove we live on a flat Earth? I would say no.
Here's the problem, John. You just said if you found a large section of Earth that was proven with curvature, and if you found a large section of Earth that was concave. Do you realize that we have found several areas of the Earth that are flat? So I'm still waiting for you to show me where's the curvature.
Where is the curvature? Where? No curvature.
Can't find it. Here we see some pictures up above that will kind of give us a better idea of what a mile and change would look like. So we see this drive up on a picture above that clearly shows what the mountains as you approach Colorado look like. Here's another picture showing as you approach them. So as we look at these mountains and continue on our drive, think back if you've ever driven from somewhere that is a low elevation to a high elevation. For me, that's easy. Many times if I've driven from the Bay Area, California, which is at sea level, up into Donner Summit, which is at about 7,000 feet, and you go straight uphill the entire time you're going through the hills, the Sierra Nevadas. Here we show a picture that the highest point on Highway 80, east of the Mississippi, is an elevation of only 2,250 feet. And remember, in this flat drive on our left, we are supposedly going through curvature of 5,400 feet, twice the highest that Highway 80 ever hits east of the Mississippi. We just need to think to ourselves what a mile in change of elevation does. Do you know what they call Denver, Colorado? It's a mile-high city. It is a mile high versus the rest of the relatively low areas of the United States. It's a mile high. And we're supposedly traveling on this left side of the screen through a mile of curvature. It just isn't happening. There just isn't curvature of the Earth. And talking about finding areas of flatness, let's discuss the oceans. Anyone ever seen the ocean curve? Can it be measured? Well, John LeBon just said if it can't be measured, it's pseudoscience. It's a belief. That's the point. So we're about done with our drive here. We're pulling up to the last little piece. We've gone 90 miles, and you tell me if you feel like you've gone through 5,400 feet of curvature. Now, even if that was true, if we just did go through 5,400 feet of curvature, multiplied out by 277, we get 284 miles of curvature on a 25,000 mile ball Earth. People need to really think to themselves, stop believing what you're told, stop trusting authority, because they're flat out lying to you. If they're not, then I am. And if I'm lying to you, please explain to me where it is. Explain to me how I'm just missing the curvature of the Earth. I'm pretty positive that there is none.
I don't believe it follows that if you can find a relatively tiny fraction of the Earth that is a certain way, behaves a certain way, that can then be used to extrapolate across the entire Earth. I don't believe it follows that if you can find a relatively tiny fraction of the Earth that is a certain way, behaves a certain way, that can then be used to extrapolate across the entire Earth.
And John LeBon, answer me this. If there's no curvature of the Earth, is it okay to then say, hey, maybe it's flat? I think there is no problem saying that. So maybe it's flat. Be kind to each other. Don't lie to each other. Open up your mind. There's truth inside and no curve. Till next time, this has been Jeranism. Peace! mile Earth in mathematical terms. So let's show some examples of how wrong this equation actually is. Mathematicians, scholars, intellectuals have all agreed that the curvature formula is 8 inches per mile squared, but that it only works for a quarter of the globe. Therefore, the original 8 inches per mile is wrong. Now, if we took 25,000 people and spread them 1 mile apart, what would we measure as curvature be? Then they correctly rephrase that to,
Thing that you do has a mathematical principle to it, or can be described using mathematics.
and that I do agree with. So, if everything that we can do can be proven or shown mathematically, then what is the equation, or what is the curvature of the entire ball Earth? Math itself is not reality. However, we should be able to describe the curvature of our 25,000
Astronauts to the moon.
10, 9, ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2,
Welcome to reality.
What's going on, everyone? It's Jaronism, back with another video for you today. 90 miles and flat. We know that the water always finds its level. That much we've covered. And we just can't seem to find the curvature of Earth. So let's add some icing on the cake. And by that, I mean let's prove what the actual curvature of our Earth is. Now, we've had people lately screaming
Math is reality.
between us. Because I've heard people out there lately saying,
I will show that few, if any, of the arguments put forward for flat Earth theory are supported by sound reasoning and compelling evidence.
so my question to those people would be, where is this answer? If no one can show curvature, then is that not proof of no curvature? And if the repeated equations do not sufficiently account for all the known curvature of Earth, then I can predict